very good morning, good afternoon, good evening. My name is Sean.
This is Alex.
And you're listening to another episode of Coaster Kings Radio. And today's episode is a continuation of last week's episode, where we started talking all things Vekoma, and that ended up being way more information than we had previously imagined. So now we're following up with part 2. Last week we talked about how Vekoma came to be. We talked about some junior coasters, family coasters, wooden coasters, mine train, flying coaster, custom projects, flat rides they did. And now we're continuing with mostly / only coaster talk.
Yeah.
Because we have so much more of the coaster lineup to discuss, the coaster products. And since we are a primarily roller coaster and theme park, well, I guess we're both, but today we're just going to be a coaster podcast.
Today it's a coaster podcast.
So for anyone listening that had listened last week, you are best off if you want to follow along and look at some of the layouts and all that kind of good stuff. Joining us on RCDB, if you go to the Vekoma page, there is a long list of all these products. We're not going to go in any particular order because we have some rides that we have combined into a single section of the episode, is where they are perhaps listed or indexed differently on RCDB. But that is a good place to kind of look around, as long as you are able to see, the coaster layouts and stuff, because I think some of these rides you may not necessarily know the layout of, especially because there's new generation Vekoma models that they have. Those are some really cool layouts, but you may not be familiar with them. Having said that, at this point you should have had enough time to pull up RCDB, so we're going to continue. And we're going to continue with the LSM coaster, and we're going to start with the
fave.
With the fave. There's only 3 of these in the world, and technically speaking they're clones, but one is technically a little bit longer than the other. So we're going to start with the shorter one, which is 996 meters, which is the Express Platform 13 version of the Vekoma LSM coaster. And the reason that it's slightly shorter, I'm talking, 17 meters shorter?
Yeah.
I don't exactly know where difference is. It may have to do with longer brake runs, because the ride at Walibi Holland was ever only designed to run 2 trains, as where the Disney ones can run 4 trains. So maybe it has to do with slightly longer brake runs and launch track.
They still show, even though the model is shown as the 1,000 plus meter version of the ride, Roller Coaster Database still shows it as being 999 or 996
very fast
meters, and it's not very consistent. But
all right, well, either way, there's 2 versions. The Disney version, I'm sure most have written.
Roller Coaster Database actually contradicts themselves, but we're pretty sure that the Walibi Holland one is just a tad shorter. I think it has to do. I had read somewhere. In fact, I think Roller Coaster Database had pointed out that the reason for the slight differences in Rock and Roller Coaster versus Express is because Express has some tighter clearances and stuff. It travels the layout a little more slowly than the other coasters because the trains are lighter, because it doesn't have onboard audio. Nowadays, onboard audio is really lightweight, but back in the 90s, when Rock and Roller Coaster and Orlando first opened, Sobot, the onboard audio systems were very heavy and added a ton of weight to the train, which is you'll remember when Six Flags dabbled in adding onboard audio to their coasters. They had to take passenger seats out of their existing roller coaster trains to accommodate the Sobot. But yeah, it has something to do with the fact that the trains were always going to be more lightweight for Express, and they could do it a little more snugly. All the extra 17 meters or whatever is actually dispersed all around the ride, if I'm not mistaken. It's not just added and subtracted from the launch.
But then it seems like way more work to redesign.
I know. That's what
Maybe it's just the launch track and the brake runs are slightly longer.
But I heard that it was the way that some of the curves and stuff, the big fan turn after the Sea Serpent was shaped different. It was a little bit more snug for Express. I actually got the meters wrong.
It's a 1,037 meter. I wrote it on wrong in the model.
Okay.
But it's 1,037 meters, so it is a significant, almost 40 meters longer. But the question is still,
it could be the brake runs.
Where I guess 40 meters isn't very. It
could be related to the extra block space that they needed for so that they could conceivably hold 2 trains in the brake run at once for the Disney models or something like that.
Yeah, may very well have to do with it. Anywho, rides itself,
I love these rides.
they're all three very different. Of course, Express being outside over the water is cool. It runs a little slower than the other ones, but I think also a little smoother, perhaps. And then I think my favorite of the three currently is Flight Force Adventures Assemble, because it just runs so fast, and I like the show building, how dark it is inside. And the Rock and Roller Coaster, well, very neat, and I like the upgrades they gave it with the magnetic braking like they did for Flight Force. I'm still not the biggest fan of the cheap cutouts that they just light up. The music on the trains is kind of weak. So currently my favorite of that is...
the audio volume, not the audio itself.
Oh, yeah.
We love Aerosmith so
I'm
much.
talking about the quality.
But, it's not very loud. It should be louder.
But all of this was actually a reaction to the original LSM coaster. Well, it's not actually LSM, which is my fault. The original launch coaster from Vekoma, which was a Vekoma Disney project. And that is, of course...
our beloved
Hyperspace. Star Wars Hyperspace Mountain at Disneyland Paris. Originally opened as... It was planned to be opened as Discovery Mountain, and then was renamed Space Mountain de la Terre à la Lune. And then Space Mountain Mission 2. Long story short, Disney and Vekoma had a real cool thing going, where a lot of money built the most expensive roller coaster in the world, launching you uphill through a cannon, and then having a honestly fantastic looper following it. I can't believe how incredible the actual layout is. I think it's one of my favorite coaster layouts in the world.
It is a great layout and so quirky, and it just never gets old. We've ridden it countless times, and I never get tired of it. It makes Rock and Roller Coaster seem like very straightforward in its approach, but I would say that while the streamlined nature of Rock and Roller Coaster / Avengers is appreciated, like there's a reson why both of these coasters are in the Paris resort, because even though they're similar on paper, modern Vekoma, quasi-modern Vekoma launch roller coaster with 3 inversions. Even though these rides have a lot in common on paper, they're very different in reality. And Space Mountain it's just so wonderfully weird. Like the choices that they made, where you just take off. First thing you do is just a giant, we call it the carousel helix. It's just a big loop around the show building. So just enjoy the speed and space, and before you dive down into the Sidewinder. That kind of stuff. Something about this ride that I don't think people appreciate as much now. Well, I guess a couple of things. First of all, it was the most expensive roller coaster ever built when it opened. Adjusted for inflation, the ride cost, it was about $90 million in 1995 dollars, and adjusted for inflation, that's about $165 million in today's money. And this was really the birth of the modern launch coaster, because prior to this ride, the only launch roller coasters that existed really were Schwarzkopf's various flywheel and weight drop model launch coasters, and Aerodynamics and their flywheel launched very low tech, low power, but efficient and cost effective shuttle loop models. So this was really what ushered in the modern launch coaster. And now launch coasters are so ubiquitous that it used to be that you would specify a coaster as a launch coaster, and now at least in Orlando, from where we are, roller coasters that open in Orlando now seem to always be launch coasters unless otherwise specified.
Yeah, I think so.
The whole thing has flipped, because with themed roller coasters and stuff, it's easier to tell a story with a launch coaster. Incorporating a lift hill into the storytelling component of a ride is a little tougher than having your roller coaster just take off, which Disney has taken full advantage of that, and Universal as well. I mean, Epic Universe is a great example. They're building 5 roller coasters, and all 5 of them are launch coasters. Really, it's kiddie coasters seem to be kind of the final vestige of Disney and Universal doing traditional lift hills, because they're just a little bit less intimidating. But now with family launch coasters becoming so popular, I think maybe the lift hill will be a thing of the past in places like Orlando and Disneyland Paris and whatnot. But yeah, fabulous ride. Just absolutely bae. Just the best.
Yeah, for those that aren't super familiar with the layout, because it is such an untraditional layout, of course, there's a lot of show elements built into the layout itself. which I find nice on a Disney coaster, but it doesn't seem to take away from this experience. So you start off being loaded into the cannon, which is a pretty fast turn out of the station and like a drop into the lift hill, a pretty significant drop actually, more than you would suspect, I think.
Yeah.
And then you sit there, and then you have your little story, and then you have the flywheel launch, which is quite intense. Even though from the outside it may not look very fast, you have people comment saying like, "Oh, it doesn't look like it goes all that fast. I don't get the hype," But by the time you see it come out of the cannon, it's already launched quite a bit. Like it's already reaching the top of the mountain. It starts underground, so don't let that fool you. And then when you go inside the show building, you have a gorgeous giant turn around the entire show building. It's just almost like you get. It's obviously it's dark, but it's unique to have such a long, giant, high-speed turn. You should dive into it, and you have a lot of speed at this point already. And then you do that giant turn around the show building before you dive down, and you have your Sidewinder. And the Sidewinder is kind of suspended in the middle of the ride, because the ride, despite looking like a mountain, it's quite far underground, so it's actually almost like a cylinder in which it's built on the inside. So the first element and the last element are honestly quite far from each other in height and distance. And so after you have your Sidewinder, you have a mid-course brake run, and that's followed by like a wavy drop down into a beautiful corkscrew, like continuous roll, with lots of cool effects in the corkscrew. After which you make a turn into another lift hill, and this is a tire-driven lift hill. It brings you about halfway up to the show building's height again, and you've got a show scene of in this case, Star Destroyer being blown up, followed by quite a steep twisting drop all the way to about the bottom of the ride's layout, which is followed by another drop. Actually, it's almost like a double drop. And then you have a tongue, which is like a half corkscrew and then a half corkscrew in the opposite direction out again. Kind of unique element. Feels kind of weird, but I don't know. I love the element. Followed by another giant helix that goes even further down, very fast into the basement. Which at that point you're in a concrete tunnel. Trough. And then this is also where they have a bunch of lights projecting to kind of imitate jumping, to hyperspeed again to come back to Earth. And then you hit the brake run pretty fast, pretty intense. But I think overall this ride is just awesome. It's baller. It's a kick-ass layout, and it doesn't feel like any other coaster out there. I think it's what I like about it so much. It doesn't really feel like a production model because it doesn't feel like anyone would do it like that again. Because it doesn't feel very cookie cutter.
It's totally, truly one of a kind.
Yeah, because if you ride stuff like the Space Mountain in Tokyo, Hong Kong, Anaheim, it feels very cookie cutter. Or you ride, of course, the LSM coasters. You can really tell that those are probably just production models. Like they're meant to be like
rides that have been designed for maximum application potential. Tron's our favorite coaster. We love it, but it's still very straightforward and kind of safe compared to the risks that they took with Space Mountain in Paris. And I know for a lot of people right now, they're exhausted by the Space Mountain overlay on the ride. I think it's as far as overlays go, it's really good. I think people would have appreciated it more if it hadn't lasted for so long, but it will inevitably be swapped out for another thing.
Of all the hyperspace layovers, this one works the best, that's for sure.
Yeah. But yeah, marvelous ride. We could talk about it all day. We've talked about it in many podcasts, but we're going to practice some restraint and continue.
And then this kind of ushers in the conversation of the MK1200 series, because despite them not being listed as such on RCDB, they are very much kind of part of the same product line. Similar, if not the same track system, and same trains, similar trains. Mm-hmm. So now we're going to continue with the MK1200 product line, which are more of like the classic Vekoma loopers, which Vekoma has always been a queen, a king, whatever you want to call it, of production models. And so MK1200 is no different. It has an array of production models, including the corkscrew with the buy-in curve, which is probably the most cloned that they've had, and also most relocated. For those, let me see, a couple of ones that people would know would be the Alton Towers corkscrew, which the corkscrews are still iconically displayed at the park's entrance right now, but that ride is a production model. And then the Super Wirbel at Holiday Park in Germany also one. And then Super Manège at La Ronde is one, or was one, I should say. Bella Carrero World has one, Star Mountain, which actually has the new Vekoma MK12 trains. And then Movie Park Germany in its previous age even had one. There's
a
lots
lot
of them out
famous
there.
parks
Walibi
here.
Belgium, RCT2 had one.
Yeah.
No, at Six Flags Belgium. There's one. Flamingo Land had one. There's still one at near where my aunt used to live in the south of France. I believe it's Euro Park. So there's actually quite a few of these out there.
There were only 2 ever operated in the United States, and they were very short-lived.
Oh, by the way, I stand corrected about the Euro Park one. That's the double loop, double corkscrew model.
Okay.
Anyway, which we'll discuss next, I guess. So the double corkscrew, double loop model, also pretty famous, mostly I think for Python, which is at Efteling in Netherlands. Was a pretty legendary coaster at the time it was built. It was, I think, the biggest steel coaster in Europe, and has just like a cult following in Europe. I think, well, the Netherlands mostly. It's just a kind of an iconic ride for the country. For many years, that was like the biggest and baddest roller coaster that there was. People that may have gone to Gardaland are familiar with that. They have a clone, Shaman. Both of them also operate the new MK1212 trains. And we're referencing the trains several times. These are the trains with the Vestas trains. So Hyperspace Mountain Paris has them too. The hydraulic Vestas trains make some of these older Vekomas a lot more comfortable, because let's not lie, it's not like the MK1200s were ever that comfortable. Let's see, what else do we have? So there's
this layout, also, this double loop, double cork. If you've ridden like Carolina Cyclone at Carowinds was the first roller coaster to have this layout, and Vekoma was really credited with taking this layout, which was at the time was a custom build for Carowinds, and repackaging it as an off-the-shelf model that would be attractive to several prospective parks. And Arrow also built a couple of clones of it too, like the Rolling X Train at Everland is a clone of this model from Arrow. But yeah, both companies prolifically peppered this double loop, double cork layout. You'll even find a version of it at the Grand Slam Canyon in Las Vegas, or Avenger Dome. They call it Avenger Dome now.
Yes. And then within the MK1200 line, Vekoma got this really grand idea to start building modern loopers, or then modern loopers, for small parks or small blueprints, and they did very well. I think all things considered, because the Tornado, Whirlwind, and Hurricane models, which obviously are all storm-themed names, sold pretty well to smaller parks. So we'll start off with the Tornado, which is a tiny model that has a kind of like a turn drop, like a giant turn into a vertical loop, then a kind of a higher turn followed by a corkscrew, another turn, and a brake run. It's incredibly simple, but very effective. And I was raced on one of these, Tornado, which is now Balagos, at
Aventura
Park Hellendoorn, yep. Which, funny enough, I drove by that like 2 days ago.
These rides are so short, and yet they're so substantial. Like they're only marginally longer than like a boomerang, but you get a lot. And they have great capacity for rides that are so small, because the Tornado is basically just the looping version of the Whirlwind. Whirlwind sold more units, but it's a more basic ride with just 2 corkscrews.
Yeah, I think the Tornado is nice because it has both a vertical loop and it has a corkscrew. But again, there's only 3 of them built. So you have Balagos, the Flying Flame, and after Park Hellendoorn, you have Tornado at Tokyo Summerland, and then you have Lupin at wow, I did not write down the name. There you go, Tussenfried. But then, yeah, like Alex said, the Whirlwind model was older and also...
Tussenfried, the park in Norway and not in Finland, like I said it was in the last episode.
I promise you, we're knowledgeable people, except we had so much in our hands.
Like, this park in Finland that I've been to and ridden the roller coaster. And
yeah.
It's too bad. The Tornado in Tokyo Summerland was retired at the end of 2022. We should have gone and ridden it when we were there.
You were there, and we were going to go ride it.
We thought about going, but then we went to Disney Sea for another day, which no regrets.
No regrets. And then we have the Whirlwind model, which is the same as the Tornado, but then with 2 corkscrews. I think one of the big differences is that Tornado crests the lift hill, and then immediately goes into the drop because it needs that space for the vertical loop, which takes up more space, I think, than the corkscrew does. And it also goes down to the ground further. It's where the Tornado model, the Whirlwind model, they have a slight turn on top of the lift hill, followed by a shallower drop. Like the drop really isn't that significant compared to Tornado. Tornado really goes to the ground, but just because it needs that height to fit a vertical loop in there, it needs all of the height for that drop. But the corkscrew, is a much less tall element, and it didn't need that whole height for it. So you can clearly see when you look at a photo, for example, a Speed Snake free at Fort Fun, that the drop is really not that big, and then you have a pretty suspended corkscrew followed by another overbank turn, or bank turn really, into another suspended corkscrew, and then a turn into the brake run, which then crosses underneath the corkscrew. Like it's a clever layout, that's for sure. Again, these parks were able to build multi-inversion looping coasters where there maybe wasn't a budget for that traditionally, because these rides were just great solutions to that, and I think they still hold up pretty good. They're kind of rough. Most of them have like
you've ridden Speed Snake, right? Obviously,
I rode Speed Snake when it was still its previous name.
The regular trains.
It was still Vilbovens, which is such a traditional name.
I rode the one at Bosque Magico before it closed. I don't know where this model went. It came from Bobbejaanland, actually, where it was also called Vervelwind. I guess just the production model.
Yeah, Vervelwind,
The production name was good.
And Knoebels had it also under Whirlwind.
That one is still open. That one's in Costa Rica.
And then there's another one in Germany, actually pretty close to where I used to live. I've just never been. Flying Tiger at Safari Land Stukenbrock.
I think that one closed.
Did it recently close?
I think it just closed.
Oh, no.
For the new flying, spinning thing that they built. Yeah.
Literally closed in 2023.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. They just demolished it like 6 months ago.
Wow.
Okay. Yeah, there's only 4 of these running left. And the Roller Coaster Database says that the one in St. Petersburg, Russia, is currently running.
But that's questionable.
There's no guarantees that it's actually running, so there's only 3 that we know for sure are
also,
running.
what's really unique about these loopers is in order to make that shape work and to make them so small, their stations were all turns.
Yeah, they all have elbows.
So, when you are in their stations, you board the train, but it's not like a straight station, which I kind of...
That reminds me fondly of Ninja at Magic Mountain.
Oh, yeah. But this elbow is even more pronounced.
This is a very pronounced elbow. I remember riding the one in Tussenfried and being like, wow, this station is like a piece of macaroni, like with a very hard elbow in the middle. But yeah, I love these rides. Great rides.
And then Vekoma also had the Hurricane, which for some magical reason is listed as a completely separate model on RCDB, but I'm pretty convinced, especially given it's also a storm name, it's also part of this MK1200 line, because it is just an MK1200.
Yeah.
And there was 2 ever built of them, and only 1 is still in operation. The one that's still in operation is Comet at Valligator Granes, which is located in the north of France, not too far from the German border. And the one that most people listening are probably familiar with is the Jester and the Joker's Revenge from the Six Flags New Orleans and Six Flags Fiesta, Texas timeline. It was first opened at Fiesta, Texas, or that's where it first appeared within the Six Flags chain, and then it moved to Six Flags New Orleans as part of that opening.
The Fiesta Texas model was purchased by Opryland USA, the original park operator, right before Six Flags took it over, and Six Flags didn't really want the ride apparently because it was just a very basic model. So their goal was to like kind of zhuzh it up a little.
So they ran it backwards.
It makes sense because like this was peak Time Warner era, and Time Warner was big on spending money and building major.
Well, it's funny to mention that because the queue for this thing was like one of the biggest, like the best themed queue Six Flags ever had. Yeah. The whole fun house for it.
And turning the trains backwards was actually a really smart move because it's easy to forget that this ride actually operated concurrently with Superman Krypton Coaster, Poltergeist, and a Vekoma Boomerang. This park actually had like 4 different sit-down looping coasters, but they all had a different like gimmick.
And it's honestly kind of fun to me because Fiesta Texas sent this ride to New Orleans, and New Orleans died, and they sent the New Orleans invert to Fiesta Texas.
Yeah, they actually ended up They exchanged.
In a way, they exchanged it out for a B&M invert.
Jester looked cute. They continued the backwards.
I think Jester was a good fit
at Jester too, because they had the boomerang, so they were like, all right, let's give this one the same gimmick of like doing a completely backwards coaster. And yeah, it ended up being such a short-lived little engagement, just like 3 summers at Six Flags New Orleans. But
it kind of makes sense why they didn't sell a whole lot of them because it's a pretty sizable model that didn't quite fulfill the Whirlwind and Tornado plot promises.
It takes up a lot of space.
But it didn't also do a whole lot more.
There's a lot of infield.
It was just,
So, which
great
I think...
to build a queue inside of it.
If I'm not mistaken, the one at Wally Gauther, filled the infield in with, landscaping.
Well, the Wally Gauther has, a
stuff.
giant, it's like an art installation. It looks like a rocket launch.
Like a decoration in the middle.
Like a decorative rocket launch. And, they built queue. There's a lot of trees in the infield. The Wally Gauther one looks like... Yeah, the infield is just like a little forest with a giant art installation.
I love
in the queue.
this picture of the one when it was at Fiesta, Texas. You can see Superman in the foreground and the giant infield and the transfer track that was way off to the side, facing off of the main drag of the coaster. It was sort of it reminded me a lot of the Bayern Curve.
Yeah, exactly. It was almost like
but with a vertical loop.
Follow up of the Bayern Curve and having the helix after the
Hurricane was to the Bayern Curve corkscrew as Tornado was to the Whirlwind, more or less. And of course, then there's a large variety of custom ones, and I'm not just talking about the Disneyland Paris one, because again, I still kind of feel that's the MK1200. But then there's custom ones. Some are kind of traditional, like Big Loop at Hyde Park. Yeah, that one was...
It's custom, but it's just a double curved double loop, but it's kind of like an oblong layout that just changed it.
It's just Dragonfire at Canada's Wonderland.
But then if you look at rides like the Black Hole Express at Kumdori Land in South Korea, well, there's a particular ride that was so high on the bucket list, and I can cry hot tears that it's no longer around. But it also even had those traditional MK 1200 trains, the rock and roller coaster trains, the wide trains. But the vertical loops on that thing were massive.
Was a beast.
Oh my god,
that thing was so. Do yourself a favor and look at pictures of Black Hole Express.
So sad it's closed.
And then
it's
look
like a hyper.
And then look at pictures of Fantasia Special, which opened nearby the same year
by
Aerodynamics. And now and that's it's the difference between what Vekoma was doing and what Aero was doing. Same year, same market. It
just looks like it was just way higher quality and way sturdier, for example. If you look at French Revolution at Lottie World, same thing.
Beefy, yeah.
Which is funny because you can really sense that South Korea had a looper age where they were building all these loopers all at once. Yeah. And then for closer to home for our American listeners, we have Blue Hawk at Six Flags Over Georgia, and which of course opened
our favorite roller coaster at Six Flags
Over Georgia. Opened in Wildwood, New Jersey, and that was relocated from the pier to Six Flags Over Georgia as Ninja, and now it's Blue Hawk with the new MK12 trains.
That ride participated in a pissing contest between Hunt's Pier and Maury's Piers, because Maury's had opened the Boomerang, the Sea Serpent, and Hunt's was like, well, we're going to build an even bigger Vekoma looper, and and then Maury's Piers ended up, that place, it only lasted a year or two. Because they were like, we want to build this big looper. They were competing not only with Maury's Piers, but they were trying to draw people from Great Adventure also, because they opened Great American Scream Machine.
Well, I will say Kamikaze, which is now Blue Hawk, was a really modern looper. Layout-wise, it was way cool. Even though it's not as big and grand as Great American Scream Machine, just the shape of it and the layout of it was way more unique and much more modern. And the same goes for Hoederix and at Park Asterix. I always forget that Hoederix is as old as it is because it opened before Viper at Magic Mountain. Mm-hmm. It's literally an older ride than Viper Magic Mountain. But when you look at the two side by side, which I find Viper and Hoederix very similar in their importance, they're really massive,
and their reverence and scope.
But then oh my god, what Viper was doing now feels so outdated. It's where Hoederix, the older coaster, literally had way more unique elements, better layouts. I just think overall, Hoederix is just a better coaster.
It's crazy riding Hoederix and thinking to yourself, it's an ass kicker. It's definitely an intense ride, and I think MK12s would do that ride a world of good, even as someone who loves the ride exactly the way it is. But it feels like that ride was so ahead of its time, absolutely a quantum leap ahead of Aero's approach to the 7 inversion looper, to the point where Viper feels like it's as old as it is, and Guldrix does not. Guldrix, you could reprofile that ride and put some modern trains on it, and you could sell it right now. to a park, and it would be.
I know. I need Goodricks to get MK12
yeah.
trains. Yeah, that'd be
like you could basically clone Goodricks, and it would be a modern enough, marketable enough ride for any park that doesn't already have like a giant looper. But you couldn't really say the same about Viper. It's a little too apparent that there was some boxes that Arrow was not capable of thinking outside.
I think especially
of
like doing the custom stuff is really where Vekoma here with the MK1200 outshined Arrow, because again Arrow had to paste the exact same elements back to back and could hardly make a connection that wasn't like a weirdly tilted off piece of track. As where Vekoma is over here stumping out, like we mentioned, Black Hawk Splash, Blue Hawk, Millennium even at Fantasy Island, which is also a really cool custom layout. And they're just like flowing, gorgeous layouts
and
with
those
different sizes of loops and different sizes of elements.
The double spine track bed that they use to accomplish the butterfly elements. Vekoma you could rely on Vekoma building a coaster once, and it was pretty much good to go until it was time for like long-term maintenance. But with Arrow, like, you would think by the time they built Viper that they would have learned.
I mean, yeah, think about it. Goodricks opened before Viper, but Goodricks didn't get its first track work until 2013.
Yeah.
And then Viper, the first year, they had to replace the drop.
Yeah.
They had to replace all the tops of the loops.
Yeah.
They had to add a massive amount of supports to the turnaround.
Yeah, they had to buttress the turnaround.
Viper pretty much would like half rebuild after one season.
Yeah, Viper needed probably millions of dollars of work after it opened. And this is after they'd already built 2 other giant loopers. I can understand. I can forgive the drop.
Well, let's not forget that the original looper, Shockwave, was an absolute maintenance nightmare.
Yeah.
It was just not repairable to the point that you had to close it.
14 years.
Like, that's
all
it.
that it lasted. And I can't believe that they didn't, by the time they built Viper, that they didn't know they needed to brace the tops of the loops. Like, they had already... I'm pretty sure they had already replaced the loops on Great American Scream Machine when they were building Viper, and they just didn't, and then had to do it the next year.
Yeah, it's awful.
Anyway.
But yeah, it's a good showcase of how the Vekoma looper just
Anyway, the moral of the story is Goodricks is a fucking king. Like, and, it might punch you in the jaw a couple times, but, like, roll with it. It's an amazing ride.
And then next up, we're moving away from the loopers for a second, which you're probably tired of hearing about already.
No
now we're moving in, which I think is really the big bread and butter.
That is
originally.
the one.
That's the original Vekoma legend, I think.
Yeah.
But now we're moving into motorbike category, which we'll make that quick. There's 2 models. We got the 600-meter model, which is only 2 of them. One we've ridden both. Well, I've ridden one of them because the other one I couldn't fit on. Sad story.
Oh, that's the Chimon?
It's the booster bike at Overland, the OG Vekoma motorbike, right next to the factory. And then a motorbike launch coaster at Chimelong Paradise in Guangzhou in Guangdong, China.
Chimon had
there's some weird restraint thing
extra
on it,
bracing on it,
and I couldn't get my legs
fit with his legs. So I rode it. Ran like
funny because we rode it right back to back too. We rode the one in the spring and the one in the summer.
Yeah.
So it wasn't like I had gained 1 million pounds.
You didn't miss much, and it wasn't even your weight. It was your legs. It was your shins. There was just no room. But yeah, the one at Chimon didn't run very well. You didn't miss anything.
And then there's 3 custom ones, including Velocity at Flamingo Land, which I think most people are familiar with. And then there's a motorbike roller coaster at Happy World in Nanjing in Jiangsu, which we've been pretty close to that ride. Because we've been to Jiangsu.
I remember really liking Velocity.
And that's a really big mall one. It's just it just goes through a giant indoor theme park. It just has no particular layout.
Is that the one that has a lift hill?
No.
Oh no, that one doesn't.
It does not. No, it launches still. But interesting choice. It works for them. I think it's kind of cool. I kind of want to ride it now, and I think about it. Oh, it does have a lift hill. Does it have a launch and a lift hill?
I was going to say, one of these has a lift hill.
Because this looks like a launch to me. Oh, no, you know what? It is a launch. But it has kind of like Flamingo Land. They all have the first hill following it has catwalks. It doesn't actually have a lift. It is a launch. Yeah. So that's cool. And then there's one under construction right now at the Great Mall of China.
I don't know if it's in storage. It's not being built.
Well, we'll see.
They never
finished it. Mystery, TBH. It's
been in a box for almost. Oh my god! That ride has been waiting for assembly for almost 20 years.
And before we completely move on to mostly, and I say mostly because I want to finish with one particular kind of ride, but before we continually move on with all of the completely new stuff, we're gonna have to talk about the SLC Because the suspended looping coaster, whether you like them or not, and chances are you don't really like them when you're listening to us. They are really important for the industry, I think. I think they were really important for Vekoma. They're one of those legends because Vekoma has pumped out a lot of these. So there's a couple models. You have the original 662-meter prototype model, which Condor at Wallaby Holland and T3 now closed at Kentucky Kingdom were those models. But then there's 27 of the standard models, which is a 689-meter. There are 765-meter models with a bonus helix, which there's 5 of them. You have 2 extended 787 models. Sounds like an airplane. Then there's a 771-meter model, the Shenlin model. There's 2 of those. And then there's 2 of those that have the extra helix. And then there's custom ones. So there's just a bunch of freaking SLCs out there. And I like some of them quite a bit, not going to lie. I think layout-wise, the SLC is a really nice layout. I think it's a better layout than the Batman clone. But of course, that is the way that they run and the way that they ride that is not as good. And I think that's why people prefer the B&M ones. But I think I'm not the only one that I know that thinks that the layout of the Vekoma one is just way better. So we'll start with the prototype real quick. It's the original hang and bang. They had to adjust the trains down, for example, at Wallaby Holland from 10 cars to 8 cars because it was just too rough. And then now it has these nice Vestas train, Freedom Flyer trains, so it runs a lot better in my opinion. Layout is simple. It just has your slow-ass lift hill, followed by a giant curve drop, a rollover, which is, I think, the signature elements of this is pretty much the only ride that really does a rollover like that. And I think that's really like the SLC move, which I love about it. It's so picturesque. Oh my god, the rollover from all these angles, love that. Anyway, followed by a bank turn into usually a sunken drop that goes a little bit below ground level, a sidewinder, followed by a helix into a double inline twist, followed by, in this case, a drop down to the ground and then into the brake run. And then the newer models, what we consider the standard model, the 689, does something extra at the end. It's a bit of a bigger model. The elements are a little more flowing. And at the end, instead of going underneath the final drop and then just kind of go the first drop and then going straight into the brake run, it actually curves over the first drop, which the first drop is steeper on this model. And it has like a swing, almost like a swinging moment.
Also, the
extra drop in
sidewinder on the updated model doesn't go quite as far down to the ground. The T2 and
the original ones go really far down. Yeah.
I love how your notes say condo.
I know. I mean,
but I think when we went to Kentucky Kingdom, we realized together. Speaking of which, rest in peace, T3. Kentucky Kingdom finally called it quits on that ride after years of fighting with the rolling stock and whatnot. They gave up on it, but what a legend! What a cool ride at the time. But yeah, the sidewinder comes really close to the ground on those first 2 models.
And then the 689 has seen, even though it's like the standard model, you can kind of tell when they were built or manufactured based on how the supports look. These are the supports are all kind of very similar. You'll see on some older models like Kong, you'll see a different kind of support structure than on newer models. Like even MP Express, I think, is one of the first to start doing the new supports. Mm-hmm. So it does look a little bit different, but the layout is pretty much the exact same. So some examples, of course, be Kong at Six Flags Discovery Kingdom. You've got Edna L'Attaque at La Ronde. You have Batman in Mexico, Six Flags Mexico. You've got Gauntlets at... why can't I even think of the name? We just went here to Stan Park.
Magic Springs
and Crystal Falls. That one. You have Vampire at Wallaby, Belgium. Like I just said, MP Express, or now called Iron Claw, at Move Park, Germany. And the list just goes on and on and on and on. Like, you've probably ridden one, and you probably...
I feel like people need to... you just had to have been there, because, like... between the rollout of the product and the launch, like in the first 2 years, they sold 10 units of this ride in 2 years. 2 of them were the prototypes, and then they built like 6 of the standard edition, and then they also built the one at Maury's Piers, and then they built, I think, one of the Helix ones.
But it's funny because this model is actually also quite popular in Japan. Like, you know how we mentioned South Korea had like a little custom MK1200 face? Well, there is also like a Japanese SLC phase because they build Fright Flight F2, they build Neo, they build Hurricane and Rizutsu. They just build like a bunch of these back to back in Japan
too. 3 in 1995.
And then there's Super Circuits. Well, is that Neo?
Neo is
Blackout and Neo. I didn't say.
No, well, Blackout. Those are
different. Blackout went to Beta Carrera World as Firewave, but that's super cool color scheme. Yeah.
But yeah, the ones that opened, there was...
it's Neo.
Neo. Neo was actually one of the ones that opened later. There were 3 that opened in Japan in 1995 alone. And they were F2 Fright Flight at Nasu Highland.
Blackout
at Suzuka Circuit, and Hurricane at Rizutsu Resort.
And then, Fright Flight came later. And then there's an expanded model of this, which is the 765-meter model with a bonus helix, which I have yet to ride one, but there's one in the States now, so I have to go ride it.
Funny, bonus helix is actually a phrase coined by TPR.
Oh, really?
We say it very matter-of-factly.
Well, bonus helix is an RCDB, too.
But, it doesn't say bonus helix, it just says with helix.
Oh, I call it bonus helix.
No,
I literally put in the show notes as if bonus helix is the actual name.
Rob Albee came up with bonus helix.
And Rob Albee, it's stuck.
And people say it like it's part of, like, it's...
Yeah, I literally put it in the show notes as bonus helix.
Like, it's a technical term, and it's like, that's a TPR term.
Well, either way, there's one in the States now, so I gotta go ride it.
That's right.
Napuko Air Coaster, which is relocated from Rotanga Junction.
And it has a nano coaster, which we should buy.
That is cute.
I would love to have an SLC Nano, especially.
And then for Europeans, Blue Tornado at Gardaland is a good option to ride. Unfortunately, the one in Australia at Warner Brothers Movie World, the Arkham Asylum Shark Therapy, is now officially demolished and closed.
Oh yeah, that was one of the 1995 installations.
And there's another one you can ride in Europe, and that's Jaguar Isla Mágica, which is located in Spain. If it was only more conveniently located, I would probably ride it at some point.
Oh yeah, then the one in Egypt,
which also is not conveniently located,
has the helix.
And then we have the 787 meter model. That's the extended model. And this one is actually, I think, the coolest model because it kind of takes the first half of the traditional SLC, and then a second halfway through, it kind of goes underneath the lift hill, and then it continues the rest of the ride on the other side of the lift hill. It's like it looks almost like a custom model, but it's been cloned. Unfortunately, there's only one that's still operating, which is Vortex at Siam Amazing Park, located in Thailand. And then there's one in Suzhou Amusement Land, which was supposed to be converted to a giant aviary, but that didn't happen. That stuff just sitting there unattended.
You heard that right.
That's Spanolip because it had a really cool tunnel through this like rock in the mountain. They did the most of that ride, and it's honestly so cool. And I'm really bummed that I haven't ridden that, even though because we have been close to this ride. Like if it was still open when we went to Suzhou, we would have 100% ridden it. Like it would have probably been a priority for me.
But yeah, the Pusing Langi is what opened in 97, and the park ordered this ride with the unique shaping of it. Just
for the record, that's not Vortex, yeah.
Supposedly there was some quirk with the way the park was laid out that they wanted to do the ride shaped this way. I mean, it looks like it's sitting on just an ordinary plot of land, but I'm sure their reasons are what they were. But yeah, I kind of like this. Like it's sort of like unfolding a paperclip.
Yeah, if you go to RCB you are looking at, you can see that the layout is quite neat. So at this point, the rollover is kind of like completely the edge of the ride. Like you have your steep drop into the rollover, followed by the high turn into the Sidewinder. When the Sidewinder goes in the opposite direction, it has that helix there.
And the helix is
and so the helix is definitely a different shape on this, and so is the Sidewinder. And then you do your double inline twist, and then after that you have a giant swooping turn underneath the lift hill, followed by kind of like a drop into the next helix, and then it's your brake line.
So it looks like a really model, but like unfolded and
then they got the rockwork version of it at the one in Suzhou. I am so bummed that it doesn't exist anymore. It looked really good in 2013 too. Like. If you look at the picture of it, they gave it a complete refresh in 2013. It only lasted until 2017.
And the positioning of it on the water was so cool.
Gorgeous, super sad.
Yeah.
Anyway, I think this is actually the park that got replaced with the new park in Suzhou that has Hurricane, the fastest mag launch coaster. So that's cool. Anyway, let's not drag it on too much. Next is the 671 meter Shenlin coaster. Now Shenlin, I don't exactly know why it's called Shenlin, but there's two of them.
That's Roller Coaster Database labeled it as such because one of the English translations for the Happy Valley invert in Shenzhen that we rode was Shenlin, but that may or may not have actually been an accurate translation.
Is that really why it's called that?
Yeah.
Anyway, there's only one operating anymore, and that's Kumali at Flamingo Land, which I think if people listening to this have ridden it, it's probably that one. And then there's one that we rode in Shenzhen, which is the Snow Mountain Flying Dragon.
This is the one. This is why it's called Shenlin, because
Happy Valley was on this kick, and we'll talk about the next model in a second. They were on this kick of building these uniquer layouts when they were first building the Happy Valley parks, which are kind of like the OG Chinese regional parks. Yeah, the layout itself, I actually think I prefer this layout over the OG. And it's because it feels very grand. It doesn't do as much, but
I love the helix dive.
So like you have your drop, it's like a giant helix drop into a vertical loop, which I really enjoyed that on because it feels different than other SLCs. That is followed by a Cobra roll, followed by a 0G roll. Everything this ride does is not done on other SLCs, which I think is the best part of it. And then that's followed by a singular helix into a brake ride. Not very long, the ride. But the helix is like a giant elevated fan helix. Just say helix doesn't describe it well.
Yeah.
It's like a giant fan turn helix. Almost like an inclined loop that's very flat.
And this model was launched because Vekoma was trying to rebrand themselves and step away from the reputation that they had developed from the original SLC layout. I remember when they were building the Kumali at Flamingo Land, and they were very excited about offering a ride that would be a much smoother version of the Traumatizer in Blackpool, because that was the standard SLC layout, the only one in Great Britain. But yeah, I like these rides. They are just wonderfully fluid and flowy. We have this ride to thank for mainland China's obsession with not only Vekoma SLCs, but knockoff SLCs that have this exact layout, of which there's or other layout. There's dozens of
because we can't forget SLCs. That the other Shenlin models with an extra helix, which are 748 meters long, almost the longest in the Vekoma loopers. They are also both the Happy Valleys. You've got Dragon and Clouds, which is located at Happy Valley in Chengdu, and you've got Golden Wings over the snowfield, if that isn't the most Chinese name, located at Happy Valley Beijing, which we're hoping to get on this year.
Yeah,
that'd be nice.
That'd be fun to ride.
But yeah, so the OG of these two is the Golden Wings over the snowfield. And so after the same layout, of course, as the previous Shenlin model we discussed, but after you have that giant fan turn helix, you have another bonus helix, almost like a figure eight. Really cool, and I love that ride model from a distance, and hopefully I get to love it up close soon. And then, of course, there's two custom ones. Great Nor'easter counts only in the fact that it has a completely custom support structure, slightly different way of shaping the elements to fit it into a pier and around a bunch of water slides.
Was that not one of your favorite coasters of 2023?
Oh my god, I love the Great Nor'easter. That must be actually, I think, my favorite SLC. I don't even think. I think it's for real. Yeah,
it's such a great ride.
And then there's Odyssey, which I also look forward to riding, hopefully this year, in the UK. And that is a giant custom one that almost feels like it should be its own category because it has those unique trains.
It's more of it's like a giant inverted boomerang, but
and the SLC had a baby. Yeah. It's like Kumali had a baby with a jib, and then boom, that thing popped out. Anywho, look it up for yourself. Great layout, very tall drop.
Emma and Rosie said it's terrifying
because they hung up there while the ride broke down.
Yeah.
Anywho's next is the suspended family coaster. Taming it down a little bit. I'm going to try and speed this up because y'all probably tired of me talking about Vekoma.
We're just very passionate.
The suspended family coaster. There is the 294mm model. Two of them exist: Jimmy Neutron, Atomic Flyer, and Steel Lasso. They feel very unique because it uses a track bed that looks more like a Vekoma kiddie coaster upside down than it does like a traditional Vekoma suspended coaster or family suspended coaster. Love the layout though, really cute, great fit for both parks that they're in.
I love that the vehicles kind of swing just very slightly,
a little bit,
really just for comfort purposes.
And then you have the 342-meter model, which is 7 of them, mostly thanks to Cedar Fair.
Yeah.
There's Bad Lagoon, which is nicely forested, by the way.
Mm-hmm.
And then this model is actually the exact same layout as the Vekoma Junior coaster, the bigger version of it that we had discussed in the previous episode, except for it's inverted.
It's the inverted flight of the Hippogriff.
Yeah, it uses like a weird canopy support structure that they can suspend the complete helix in one support. Really cool.
It's very tree-like.
It's very tree-like. I think the Madagascar one that was at
Dream
World
World
was
Gold
actually
Coast.
themed to be like a giant tree.
Yeah.
And then the Cedar Fair ones that probably most listeners have written is the Kitty Hawk at Carowinds, Silver Streak at Canada's Wonderland, Flying Ace Aerial Chase at Kings Island.
The OG.
The OG.
Which I rode shortly after it opened, and I was beside
And I think it's
myself
close
with
one near
delight.
us, because Legoland had one, Flight School.
That's right.
And that's
Yeah,
close now.
Flight School
Which
has
I
been
love
retired.
the little lights they did on the lift on
It was
stuff.
cute.
It was cute.
We're both in the aviation industry, so we love when roller coasters are themed to commercial aviation.
And then you have the 375-meter model, which is a brand new model, and there's currently two of them. One is under construction, and the other one is the Dino's Wonder Wheel model, which I heard good things about. I haven't ridden it yet.
I can't believe you have a place in New York City and you haven't even been to Coney Island yet.
I know.
To ride the roller coasters.
And now I'm going to leave in the summer and do it.
Eventually.
Okay.
Someday. I love Coney Island.
I'll get it this year. I'm pretty convinced I'll get it this year. And then next on our list of these family spinner coasters is
Boston.
the 395 model, which there's 7 of them. Kvasten is, I think, the original, right?
That's the OG, yeah.
That is the one.
It's designed around
Grunelund.
Grunelund's various space constraints.
Of course, for Orlando visitors, Freedom Flyer at Funspot Orlando is one of those. Fighter the Sarasauce, whatever.
Flight of the Sarasauce? Flight of the Pterosaur.
Pterosaur
At Paulton's Park?
Polton Park.
Paulton's Park.
Is one as well. And then there's 13 of the 453-meter models, which are the newer models. Like Orkanen is the original. At Farup Summerland, they have Dragonflyer at Dollywood. Wonder Wars Movie World, the Gold Coast is adding the Wizard of Oz Flying Monkeys roller coaster. That is not the name of it, but that is what it's themed to.
You'll find these throughout Europe and China, especially. They're very popular.
Yeah, there's a bunch of Fanta Wild ones.
The Fanta Wild parks have built up.
Building them.
Are responsible for, I think, half of these installations.
Yeah, pretty much half the episode following is all Fanta Wild. Anyway, then there's the 550-meter version, which there is one at Mistral, which... Sorry, that's the name of it.
This is the family coaster that's going to where La Feria was.
Yeah, and it's actually the longest suspended family coaster from Vekoma yet, but we don't know the layout yet. But yeah, it's going to Mexico City.
Well, good for her.
Next up is the MK700. There's just only 4 of them.
Yeah.
I don't know. I have not ridden one, but these are a couple that you may know about. It's just a custom layout. It's inline seating, so 1-on-1.
Same seating as the Vekoma Revolution.
Exactly. It's like a Bobbiano.
It's essentially, the Revolutions are essentially the same product line as this, but organized differently for marketing purposes, I think.
And then Hornets at Wonderland in Amarillo was originally...
At Astroworld.
Astroworld.
The Mayan Mindbender.
Was moved not too far away.
The Mega Blitz at Vienna Prater is awesome. It's an icon. It's like a staple there. Would have been it's a very compact ride that is a great outdoor ride, but would have made a great indoor coaster too.
Exactly.
It's very helixy. I feel like from looking at it, it looks like something that a park would have bought to make their Space Mountain type roller coaster like Astroworld did with Mindbender. And then the big giant scenic one
is Straufe at Plopsaco, yeah. And then the MK900 models, there's 4 of them. The 2 most notable ones are Vogelrok at Efteling and the never-ending Temple of the Lift Hill, Crazy Bats at Phantasialand. I think Vogelrok is a really spectacular ride. Very comfortable.
Tibidabo's coaster is also an MK900, even though it's
not listed as such
elsewhere.
Yeah, which that is a spectacular ride too.
Fabulous ride. Just a great ride.
Boomerangs, there's 53 of them. You have been in a boomerang.
So many.
You've seen a boomerang. Only thing I want to discuss about the boomerang in this episode is how legendary it was for the industry and how it was like a nail in the coffin for Aero very early on. Because suddenly a regional park, a big park, a small park, it didn't matter who wanted one, could build a space-efficient 6-looper that went backwards and forwards, had tall drops. I mean, it was the dream machine of the industry. And it sold like hotcakes.
And it's still being sold to this day.
It's still being sold.
Parks in China are still building.
Of course,
these
they're smoother now. Now you can add MK12s to the mix, like Walibi Holland did with Speed of Sound, and they're really comfortable. Mm-hmm. It's just, I think, one of the most important roller coasters in the roller coaster history of the world. And again, I don't want to list all the models, but that's what I want to say about it.
I never miss a boomerang.
Like, there's a reason that the first ever Aero Corkscrew, the first ever modern inverting coaster, was replaced by a boomerang.
It's very symbolic.
Very symbolic.
I mean, and this ride just like highlighted the visionary nature of Vekoma. They had just started building roller coasters. This was one of the first things.
There's a reason that they went ahead and did their own thing without Aero, because they didn't need Aero. They really didn't.
Like the whole
Aero needed Vekoma.
The reverse lift hill and then like the forward lift hill that would like drop into the track to allow the ride to. I mean, just brilliant. Like really
smart,
brilliant,
very smart
applications of their technology to create this ride. That it was so ahead of its time. It's basically timeless. The fact that this ride went to market in 1982, and then in the late 90s and early 2000s, I mean, they were being prolifically added
everywhere
throughout the industry, and to this day are still being added. The SLC is also still being installed. I think the fact that we have Queen Cobra as recently as 2017, and
don't forget Mayan, Coaster Mayan at Energylandia.
Yeah, Queen Cobra is the most recent one though.
I thought so. Okay.
Yeah.
Anyway, speaking of boomerangs and inverted coasters, the next up is the Invertigo. Only 4 of them, but also very revolutionary. Face-to-face seating was meant to be a launched inverted coaster. Didn't quite work out that way. Coasters that are still around that are Invertigos are Diabolique at Movieland Park in Italy, and Vertigo at Kings Island, which is that my favorite coaster at Kings Island?
Yeah,
possibly.
Probably.
And Trios
no vortex
at
and no
Bajatel. It's pretty much the exact same as a boomerang, but inverted, and you're facing face-to-face. Very comfortable when it comes to the catch cars and drop tracks. However, the vertical loop is actually faced outward because the support structure is so wide that it couldn't face it inward. Yeah. So the original boomerang, the loop goes into the infield, as where here it leaves leaves the infield.
Yeah.
But that's just like a super little nerdy detail. There's one more of, the suspended boomerangs, but we'll discuss that in a little bit.
And Vertigo at Great America was a childhood favorite of mine. It was legendary. And such a cool addition for a park that already had a B&M invert. You had 2 inverted coasters, massive inverted coasters that were very unique in their appeal. And a great response to Marine World opening an SLC and a boomerang. Great America was like, well, we're going to open a coaster that's both. So, how do you like them apples? And now it's a parts donor for Kings Island.
And then there is the Splash Party, which the only one that is around is Bandit Bomber at Yas Waterworld.
Yas.
And the nice thing is about this ride is that I feel like it belongs everywhere. Like, Knock Knock Volcano Bay, why isn't there a Bandit Bomber at your park?
Yeah.
Why isn't there a roller coaster that goes around Volcano Bay that lets you splash people?
Please.
Super fun.
Yeah.
Another one-off is Big Air at EDA Theme Park. Just honestly, it looks like a giant inverted boomerang tower. It's like 2 of them, like far apart from each other. And all it does is just like a big drop. Like it literally just like get big air time. That's it. Like just drop, big shuttle.
A big standard
meant to have spinning seats or spinning vehicles. Yeah,
the vehicles would do 180s at the peaks. It was also called the Hammerhead Stall. If people remember that from 20 years ago when Thorpe Park actually had announced one, and then it was canceled, and they built Colossus instead. Quite the redirection. And then was the Enigma model, which I have not ridden one, but you've done the Walking Dead. It's just a Vekoma family coaster, basically. But again, marketing. It was.
Marketed to be more like a indoor coaster from Vekoma. The whole product was indoor.
Ours it was still No Way Out when I rode it at Fort Park, but it's like it's a roller skater in a building basically. Nothing crazy, but again, well marketed.
And then there's 2 of them. The other one is Dark Ride at Dream Park. Then there's Swinging Turns, which there's 3 of them, which was actually one of those Vekoma Aero projects where Vekoma was in charge of building the layout, building the track, and then Aero's going to supply the trains, and that was that.
And their agreement was that Aero would build all of the custom suspended coasters, and Vekoma would handle manufacture of the production model.
So there's 3 of them. Dreamcatcher, Bob and Janland, which we've ridden.
Delightful ride.
Awesome ride. Actually received Vekoma suspended trains that are also found on the kiddie suspenders. And Vampire at Chessington, those trains. True, yep.
Yeah.
And then, which Ninja and Magic Mountain, if it doesn't get demolished for a coaster,
that would be a
should
great
get those.
solution.
Grandpa's Jet at Mitsui Greenland, which we're hoping to ride this year.
Yeah. Still has the aero trains.
Has like the Orca-themed aero trains, which are just regular aero trains just painted. And then Sky Coaster at Dreamworld in Thailand is also swinging turns. Layout is pretty simple. Yep. It has it feels very much like a production model, where after the lift hill you have kind of like not a super tall drop, pretty scenic, followed by a couple of swinging turns, literally as the name suggests, and then followed by like 3 giant helices that are separated by a turn, which then make their way over to the end.
Very efficient, compact layout.
Yeah, I have no hate. And then there is the Illusion, which there are 2 of them, and Revolution at Bobbejaanland is the only one remaining, because the other one was at
Chaos at Opryland. And Chaos was the same layout, but it had a train that was 50% larger. It was
wider.
It was a 30 vehicle train.
It was even longer than Revolution.
Yeah,
because Revolution has the world's longest roller coaster train. But is it 24 seats?
20 vehicles. It can hold 40 people, but Opryland had 30.
That's so crazy.
Isn't that crazy? I can't even imagine needing more capacity, but Opryland was in it to win it at the time. And it's basically an MK900.
Yeah, so if you don't know what exactly this ride is, it's just it's a giant show building. It is meant to be one singular scene that you ride the walls of the show building all the way up in like a spiral helix kind of mode. However, it's like turn straight, turn straight, turn straight, all the way up to the top. And then there's a giant screen at the bottom and a giant screen at the top. And there's like a show scene going on. They're playing the classic one on Revolution right now. It's kind of like, trippy, like a clock ticking and whatever's going on. And I believe it was the same for Opryland.
Yeah.
And then following it is the roller coaster part where you're actually coasting. And that is not very spectacular. But since the train is so long, you go through all these little tunnels that are on the outside. There's pretty much 2 parallel walls on the outside of the show building. And in these really tiny, thin walls of what is left of the show building, you spiral down with drops and stuff.
It's like a show building and then a shell outside of the show building.
And within those
in
walls,
between the building and the shell is the coaster portion of the coaster.
So it's really just narrow-ass little hallways where the coaster is going through to make its way all the way back down.
It's such a huge show building, and a vast majority of it is just empty space.
Yeah, it's just a show scene.
To play up the drama of the movie.
But it's so unique and it's so different that I love this model. I think it's so cool, and I understand
the Helix finale at the end is great because at the very end it pokes back into the center of the. And right
where the big screen is, at the bottom of the big scene is where you go by in giant helix.
When they first opened, they were screens on top and bottom, and it was sort of it reminds me of what Circle Vision was doing, with Disney, where the center of the screen had a little hole with a projector. Both screens,
but you couldn't really notice it.
Had the same hole in the center, and both projected at each other. The lower screen on both installations were removed after a few years because the vibrations of the finale of the helix going around it kept damaging the system and damaging the screen.
Understand.
So for the Bobbejaanland one, they moved to a practical effects scene there at the end as the component with probably with shock absorbers for the projection for the camera, so that when it projects up at the ceiling, it doesn't come out all wonky looking.
Yeah. I think this is one of my favorite rides. It's just so unique.
I love Bobbejaanland.
It was very I feel almost into Space Mountain or Rock 'n' Roller Coaster ages. It was just a really nice.
The fact that Bobbejaanland has
option.
This and Dreamcatcher, I just love that place.
I know it's not too more.
I love their Vekoma goodies.
A horse pedal, like we mentioned in the last episode. So almost kind of
a
really unique Vekoma. I love that over there.
Vekoma family, the Okie Dokie.
I know. Yeah. Oh yeah. It really is a nice Vekoma.
It's a great Vekoma park.
And it's all very unique Vekomas, and it's real close to the Vekoma factory too. Yeah. Alrighty. So next up is the Power Coaster, which is only one of them.
Casey Jr. at Disneyland Paris.
Which we rode a couple weeks ago.
And it's the very first application of Disney's now ubiquitous Sobot system.
It's really cute. Audio. I almost feel like I want Anaheim's to replace with that.
It's such a cute ride. I love that ride.
Really, it's just kind of like a Vekoma family coaster with obviously the little charge.
And don't miss it. It's a big ride.
It's big. It goes all the way around their outdoor dark ride, water ride.
Yeah, their Storybookland Canal Boat version, La Pie de Conte de Fille.
And last but least of these old models.
Last but least.
A Wild Mouse. And there's only one of these Wild Mouse. It was the Alton Mouse
It was originally built
Tower Mouse.
for the Prodder, I believe.
Oh, really? And then it went to Alton Towers?
And then it went to Alton Towers.
And now
it's in Idlewild. And apparently it doesn't run super consistently.
Oh, it's not really open?
Yeah.
Oh, that's
I hear of people having a hard time getting it, but I know people who got the credit this past year.
So now we have gotten to the new age models. And the first one we'll be discussing is the Renegade model, which is called Invincible Warriors, located in Fentiwild Land in Taichou. And this model has a lift hill followed by a really steep twisting drop, and then a giant stall, and then just a ton of low-to-the-ground elements, including a bunch of airtime hills and a couple of inversions. Looks very swoopy, much in the vein of most of the new Vekoma models.
And then, the Wildcat model, which is at Far Oak Summerland as Phoenix. Again, it's a lot of these designs use the same kind of method. They have like one big drop and like one giant inversion of sorts. The one here, Phoenix, has like a big stall loop that like twists out at the end.
It looks so cool, and we've written it. So there's actually, well, we haven't, but our team has written it.
Yeah.
So we have that on the coskins.com too. And then one of the first models they came out with was actually the Firestone model. There's two of them. One is
and this is a launched model.
Yeah, one is still under construction, and then the one that's already open is Wrath of Zeus at Finn Wonders. And this starts off with almost like a spiral into a top hat, followed by like a spiral out of it.
Instantly iconic.
Almost crazy how iconic it is. And then it has like really low to the ground, really fast elements. Like the drop out of the top hat is also almost like zero G-roll elements out of it. Very cool. It has vertical loop. It has a corkscrew, a bunch of like fast helices. Again, it's all very much in the same vein.
I love that this one has a vertical loop too.
Yeah, I think so too. But yeah, this is kind of like most of these models that we're going to be talking about. They're all just very swoopy and fast and quick and almost like a new generation.
Lots of positive G's.
Very specifically Vekoma. No other manufacturers doing this kind of stuff right now.
And then Lech Coaster at Legendia in Poland was like the first. It opened in 2017. It was like the first like documented foray into this generation of Vekoma rides. It has a fabulous, like almost vertical twisting drop immediately into a sidewinder that's like half the height of the lift hill. So like the G-forces are super strong on that. And then like most of these other models, once you finish that first drop, first inversion combo, it's a lot of low to the ground stuff, lots of zero G rolls, barrel rolls, corkscrews, helixes, airtime. The one Lech is, I think, one of its most famous gags is that corkscrew through the station.
Yeah, like Phoenix.
Zero G roll type thing. Yeah, Phoenix does it too. It's kind of like the Vekoma's answer to the signature GCI station fly through.
Exactly. And so the next model is actually kind of two models in one. You've got the Space Warp and the Hyperspace Warp. So the Space Warp, which we know from Formula and Energylandia, is a launch coaster that starts off with a sidewinder, and the end of it, the corkscrew, is almost like a drop all the way to ground level. Mm-hmm. And then just a bunch of hopping around, airtime moments, helices, and two additional corkscrews. And then there's a Hyperspace Warp version of it, and that actually just includes a lift hill with a vertical drop instead of having the launch for it. And there's actually more of the Hyperspace Warp ones because there's 4 installations at the Oriental Heritage Parks from Fentiwild, including Celestial Gauntlet, Circus Carnival, Flying Dragon, and Stag's Carnival. So honestly, all really cool different names and themes, which is pretty typical of this.
So if you want to ride the launch Space Warp, you have to go to Energylandia, and if you want to ride the lift hill version, you have to go to mainland China to one of the Oriental Heritage
And for the following coaster, if you want to ride it, you also have to go to mainland China, because that is the Top Gun launch coaster. There's 6 of them, and all of them are at Fentiwild Parks. Mm-hmm. You've probably seen videos of pictures of these, because they're all themed to be on a giant aircraft launch carrier. And they are really short trains. So
I love this model.
2-car trains, 8 passengers. You launch off of the edge of a aircraft carrier, and then the layout is honestly pretty wild. It has a lot of really rolling inversions that you could not do with a longer train.
Yeah.
And then it has a mid-course brake run just to kind of space up in order to operate like that. I highly doubt any Chinese park operates in the way you need that. But that is what the model calls for.
Yeah, if you want to ride this, get ready to wait in line for one train operations on an 8-passenger train roller coaster.
Exactly. But I think this is one of the coolest new models that they have right now. And there's currently 3 already open. They're all called Fighter Jet, and then there's 3 more they're building that haven't opened yet.
I love
but they're also probably going to be called
top hat of sorts is really just like a double.
Yeah, the top hat's like a double inversion. So like you invert going up
thing,
and then you correct yourself on top, and you're straight up, and then
you dive down.
Do it again, diving down. And then there's just a lot of airtime.
Yeah.
A really, really cool model, but definitely very different actually from the other one so far, which is kind of nice. And then there's the Family Launch Coaster, which most people are most familiar with Big Bear Mountain at Dollywood.
Which we haven't actually made it up there to ride it yet, but we will eventually.
And then there is a couple more, including Lightning and Kia, if I pronounce that right.
Lightning is cool because you get to go through twice.
That's right. Yeah, you go much faster.
Yeah.
Anyway, and then there's the Super Boomerang.
The Super Boomerang! I'm so excited for this. So Phantom Wild Wonderland's Cloud Shuttle opened at the end of It opened like mid-2023, if I'm not mistaken, which provided a very exciting visual aid for when Six Flags Great Adventure shocked the world with the announcement of Flash Vertical Velocity, the first next-generation Vekoma looping coaster in the United States. This ride, to me, seems like such a fabulous homage to the past, present, and future of what Vekoma is developing. It's got everything. Vertical drops, tons of airtime, lots of inversions, hang time, positive Gs, multiple LSM launches. It just seems so cool. Like, I cannot wait. Of all the rides opening in 2024, like, this is the one that I think I'm the most excited for.
Yeah,
truly.
I think in our 2024 episode, we also, I think I mentioned this as well.
We talked about it quite a bit. Before. Yeah.
And then for this next model, it's a dive pretzel coaster. There's really not much information about it. It's 640 meters long. It's pretty much all we know. It's supposed to go to the Great Mall of China, but it's in storage, so who knows what the layout is.
It's in storage probably with that motorbike coaster.
It is, yeah. And then there is the Family Boomerang line, which is also part of like the new age Vekomas. I think Drayton Manor was the very first to have one. I still remember Ben 10 being like so cool. I was like, wow, it's so different and unique.
When I wrote that, it was
I think that was a really good move on Drayton Manor's behalf. But currently there's a bunch of them. So there's the 185 meter model, which is just like a small original model. And then you have the rebound models, 21 of them.
That's like the figure 8 one.
Yeah,
right?
pretty much.
Yeah.
The Snoopy Soapbox Racers at Kings Island will be one, and there are several of them. Angelandia has one. Polton Spark has one. And there's 21 of them. Yeah, that's like the most common model. They've got Spirit, which is 3 of them, Light Explorer at Energylandia, and Salvin at Farab.
This is like the out and back model.
Yeah, so like it just kind of skips around. I kind of look at it like it's skipping over the water, exactly as the Energylandia one kind of does. But it really isn't doing much. You just have your vertical draw, like your vertical lift till back, and your vertical stick at the end, and then some couple skips in between. Tweestrijd, there's actually 2 of them, believe it or not. Tweestrijd is by far the coolest, I think, of Family Boomerang because it's a racing family boomerang coaster.
I love it.
Which the original and the only one currently operating is found in Emmen, the Netherlands, at Wildlands, at the zoo. And then they are building another one, which is going to go to Warner Bros. Super World, the Gold Coast, as part of the Wizard of Oz world, themed to the tornado kind of like in the Kansas area.
It will be a compliment to the family invert that they're also building with the flying monkeys.
And all these are replacing another Vekoma.
Yeah.
So it's like Vekoma.
They're all replacing the Helix edition of the 1995.
Kind of a nice full circle moment, isn't it?
Oh yeah, totally. Best case scenario for when your client demolishes your ride,
build 3 new
coasters. Yeah.
And then there is 4 custom ones out there, and Good Gravy coming to Holiday World is also going to be a custom family boomerang. And next up, we have the suspended throw coaster.
So Hallsuperkopf at Olympus Park Tripsdrill in Germany, fabulous ride. Just a great example of what Vekoma has been up to lately. Doesn't feel at all like an SLC. Really, it feels... A lot of that ride highlights are the laterals and airtime hills. It's got 3 different 0G roll corkscrew type moments and then like an Immelman type thing also. But I think the biggest highlight is the way that it's intertwined with their custom family Vekoma boomerang.
That's right.
And another suspended thrill coaster, custom Vekoma family boomerang installation duo will be coming to Emerald Park in Dublin.
That's right. And you're right. This suspended throw coaster feels nothing like an SLC. The focus is not on inversions. The focus is on like inverted airtime and like weird swoops and turns. And It's a completely different kind of feel.
The best moment was that second, or the third inversion, second twist roll, where it twists out and then goes in the opposite direction.
Oh,
and
yeah,
like
that tiny little
270 at exiting out of the twist. That was my favorite part.
Great ride. We have a whole episode on Ellipnis Park Tripsrail if you want to listen to it. That is from our season 4.
Solid. I hope we get one of those in the States.
Oh my god, I'm surprised. Well, I'm surprised we don't have one, but China's building.
We have so many inverts in the States already. I know the market is saturated, but hopefully somebody somewhere will build one.
And then the last of the new models is actually the tilt coaster. You're gonna think, but that already existed, which is true. But both Circuit Breaker coming to Coda Land and Iron Rattler coming to Six Flags Qiddiya, which Iron Rattler has that first ever 000 G roll where you do 2 inversions and 1 0 G roll. Crazy shit. I wish we had it here.
And the drop on there is it's like a spiral drop too.
It is a spiral drop. That one looks so cool. Too bad
it's already almost finished construction, if I'm not mistaken.
Google pictures of it. I'm sure you can find quite
Circuit Breaker is beginning vertical construction. The pieces are on site.
Now it's just a question of when.
Yeah, hopefully it opens.
And then you have ridden the OG,
and then I rode Gravity
the
Max.
High on my list.
It's a really fun ride, but I mean, it kind of it's a little gimmicky. It's very like diminishing returns because obviously the highlight of the experience is the tilt drop. You dive into an underground tunnel that's just a really powerful dirt turn, like just a big swooping U-turn, and then into a vertical loop, and then into a double helix, and the ride is over. I think the modern tilt coasters look like much better, more complete rides. I kind of liken it to the first generation of B&M dive coasters, where like the whole ride was the dive, and then it was over. And now modern dive coasters have they start off as a dive, but they're really actually just modern looping coasters with lots of elements and acrobatics and positive Gs.
It reminds me a little bit of like the B&M dive coaster. How it started off is just dive. That's it. Dive is the point. And now it's like, oh, the dive is there.
Yeah.
Sometimes we skip the dive because we really won't even have the holding brake on.
Yeah.
Emperor. And then a bunch of inversions and stuff.
Yeah. So I'm looking forward to I really, really hope Circuit Breaker opens. I don't care when it opens. I just want it to open.
Yeah. So
please open. States, please happen. It just seems too good to be true when they announced it. We were just dying because the tilt looks awesome, but the whole layout looks amazing.
Oh, I agree.
Amazing.
Yeah.
So
it's like all these coasters we discussed and one with a tilt.
Yeah. So.
And we're gonna finish the episode up with a classic, beloved, I think, favorite overall.
We have to. This is this ride represents us as a brand.
Oh, totally.
In the same way that Tron and Hyperspace Mountain represent us as a brand.
And that is
It's the giant inverted boomerang.
Boom. Orang.
Boom.
Yeah. This is by far our favorite Vekoma model, I think.
Yeah. The production models.
It's just tits to the wall crazy. It's just every time it's wow, I can't believe they built this.
Every time we ride Stuntfall, we are terrified and
I must say we are
enamored.
Lucky because we've done a lot of we have done quite a few of these. There's only 6 of them. And we have done, of course, Deja Vu when I'm still Magic Bound. We've done Aftershock at Silverwood. We have done Stuntfall. We've done all these quite a few times.
And we did Goliath. So we did Deja Vu. We both did Deja Vu in both of its locations.
Yep. So I guess I've done 4 because I'm going to count the weird train situation at New England.
Because Goliath was not very good.
Goliath was unfortunate.
Premier rides, I love you, but that train sucked. And
that was very tragic.
The one, Stuntfall is still so much better.
Yeah, Stuntfall we ride pretty regularly. I think at this point now we've been and ridden Stuntfall as 4 separate visits.
At least 3.
At least 4 separate visits. Because we had 2 visits back to back, and then we had 2 more visits this year. So
you're right, we did. Yeah, we did 2 visits to that park just for Stuntfall, and then came back 2 more times for Batman.
For Batman, yeah.
But then, you come for Batman, you stay for Stuntfall. Basically.
And Stuntfall, so for those that maybe are just listening out of curiosity and aren't even that familiar with it, and you haven't pulled it up yet, a giant inverted boomerang is a inverted roller coaster that drags you 200 feet up backwards.
Vertically,
completely vertical, you're hanging, dangling, 90 degrees, vertical, suspended, and then you drop, and you do that drop 200 feet, which is pretty much, it's a hypercoaster, pretty much, for all intents and purposes.
It's an inverted, forward, backwards, 6 inversion hypercoaster.
And then you obviously have your, Cobra roll, butterfly-looking Cobra roll, which is a really unique Cobra roll because it's so tall. It had, the giant half loops and then very sharp corkscrews.
It's very Roller Coaster Tycoon.
It's very Roller Coaster Tycoon.
Like, the Cobra Roll and Alpengeist is like what it reminds me of the most.
And then you have a giant vertical loop, but the way the loop is shaped, it's kind of circular, so it doesn't feel as much of a clothoid, where like you're at the top of it and like quickly reduce. And that's because it has to traverse through that loop twice. So you're gonna go through it with a lot like different speeds in both ways. Because once you do that loop, you go through it slower than the next time. Because then you go up that vertical tower, and you are on the second vertical tower, 200 feet tall, facing up to the sky. And you're being caught by the sketch car, which is strangely smooth but strangely terrifying. Yeah. And then you lift all the way up to the top, and all you see is the sky around you because you are high up. Look to the sides, you are nowhere near the ground. You drop backwards, 200 feet. I think that is my favorite sensation of almost any roller coaster in the world.
Front row on the giant invertible
Oh my god, I just got happy thinking about it. Bliss. And you're just falling, and I still remember on the Deja Vus, they had those crazy long seatbelts for some reason. They were like super long because they could check them easily. And so I still remember like when seatbelt was like floating
like
in the
flying
air.
Away, like
flying away
streamers in the wind.
Like a streamer next to you in the wind. And then so you drop backwards, and then you go through that loop a lot quicker because then the loop is the first element to follow versus being the last element. Then you go back.
These are heavy trains; they lose speed very quickly. So the inversion experience going forward and the inversion experience going backward is very different because of how quickly they run out of speed.
For sure. And then, of course, you have that Cobra Roll again, which is a lot, I think, more comfortable the way back because you kind of hang through
because you're going so much slower.
In fact, when you sit in the front row, I feel like you have some time to appreciate the roll from upside down for just a quick second because you are not going super fast.
Because on the way out, you blow
it.
into it so quick because you're in the front of the train and it's the first.
And on the way back, you're the last car of the ride to make it back through the elements. And so right just before you head back into the station, you kind of have almost like a
moral of the story is that your front row experience and your back row experience are both fabulous for very different reasons, and the ride begs rerides.
So I will say, just because of the views, the front is just like spectacular.
I think we agreed that having the backwards drop at 200 feet is even better than having the forward drop at 200 feet, which is achieved in the front row.
Funny enough, one of the most terrifying moments of the whole ride is actually the very end, because you blow through the station again backwards. It doesn't actually slow you down at any point there. And you go all the way up that tower again, up the first tower, and in the moment that you're out of speed, you're already attached to a catch car, so then suddenly it's just like, boom, you stop flying, and you just hang there.
That's what's so crazy about this ride.
And it sounds like a terrifying moment.
Is that it has, all the brakes that it has are emergency brakes.
Yeah,
it does not use brakes during normal operation. It only uses catch cars.
That's true. Oh, such an incredible ride. Oh, so incredible. I can't wait to go back.
Me too.
So you need to pick up a trip soon to go back.
And it's fun. It's easier, because of our jobs, it's easier for us to go to Madrid and ride it than it is for us to go to Washington State and ride, and like go to Idaho, drive in from Spokane and ride it. So, but we do need to go to Silverwood again. Like,
I know. Eventually. Yeah, Silverwood also runs really consistently. And I will say, of all the SLCs left, you've also got Quantum Leap and Russia and God knows if it runs. And then there's the one at Xinjiang Action Park.
I have tried 4 separate times to ride this coaster, and I still have not gotten on it.
I have not gotten on it. Because I guess I've tried twice, because one time we got snowed out, and then the other time we went to the park and they were working on the train.
I had already tried twice when we went, and so maybe 5th time's the charm. But maybe
this year we'll get on it.
What's nice about it is that it's in the middle of Shanghai. Like, you can always just swing by there on the metro to see if it's running. And if it's not running, then oh well.
Just take that weird tunnel with all the bikes in it. Yeah. That was so Dutch.
You know the one.
Anyways, that's our favorite. I think our favorite overall. Yeah. But I did want to end the episode with a little bit of a talk about Vekomas. Just some of our favorites that we have. Of course, Stonefall, we've already mentioned. Guderick's mentioned being one of our favorites. That includes Blue Hawk.
Colorado Adventure.
Yeah. Great mine.
It's like the truest, greatest custom.
And if we did listen to our last episode, that was discussed last episode.
Yeah.
Revolution.
Obviously.
Bobby Allen. Batwing. Also discussed
and
last
Firehawk,
episode.
Rip.
And Vertigo. Express Platform 13. Fly.
Oh,
Fly is so good.
Yeah.
Also last episode.
Yeah.
And then last but not least, of course, you got Hyperspace Mountain and Tron.
Yeah.
Those are our favorite Vekomas. We obviously love Vekomas. We're big fans. I think their modern coaster, everyone's a big fan. I think they're heading the right way. But I even think their classic stuff is
their
kind of
legacy
legendary.
Coasters deserve recognition. Wow.
That is the most recognition they can receive. And with that, we're going to end this longer episode than usual. All about Vekoma. This is part 2. Once again, part 2. Make sure you check out part 1. Make sure you leave a good review, hopefully, anywhere that you will find us and wherever you're listening. And if you're not following us on Instagram and Facebook yet, do that. We post a lot of stuff about roller coasters, theme parks, pictures, cute stuff on there. And we'll catch you guys next week. Thanks for listening. Bye.
Bye.